Welcome to the Dublin Bible Talks, midweek Bible talks for workers in Dublin. I'm Cameron Jones. The account of David and Goliath is about the most famous story in the Old Testament. But what is it really all about? This week we have the first of 3 sessions, and we encounter Goliath. And please consider joining us live on Wednesdays from your workplace, 1 p.m. Dublin Time on Zoom. It's a simple way of identifying as a Christian in your workplace. Simply use the link bit.ly/DublinBibleTalks. That's bit.ly/DublinBibleTalks. What's your outlook on life? Do you always look on the bright side? Or do you think of the worst that can happen? Do you see silver lining in every cloud, or a cloud behind every silver lining? Whichever way you answer, the opening scene of 1 Samuel chapter 17 confronts both outlooks. It confronts both of them with a stark reality. There are enemies that neither optimism nor pessimism can handle. We often think of David and Goliath, I think, as a children's tale, a feel-good underdog story. But in the Bible, it's set in a very, very dark moment. Israel, God's chosen people, are facing its greatest military threat. The king they had demanded to have, Saul, the asked-for king, is proving to be a failure. He'd been anointed by God, but he has disobeyed and he's now been rejected. And in the midst of that rejection, a new king, David, has been chosen, a young man, and God's Spirit has fallen on him and it remains in him, but no one knows about this yet. And so we find God's chosen people vulnerable, the Philistines advancing, fear gripping them. And today we're going to look at what is perhaps one of the most famous stories in the whole of the Old Testament. The idea of David and Goliath is so pervasive that it even exists in a post-Christian culture like we have in the West. It's used as a metaphor for every time we face everything that feels bigger than us. It's an insurmountable problem. This is such an important story that we're going to spend 3 weeks on it. Let's have a look at the first 3 verses. Look at the 2 armies. We're brought to see the view of the valley of Elah. On one side, the Philistine army, Israel on the other. It's a situation that's been playing out since the beginning of this book, and it's actually going to continue all the way to the end. But this time the Philistine army are far into Israelite territory compared to the last time we met them. The last time, we might remember Jonathan's initiative. It wasn't Saul's initiative. Saul, the king, didn't take the first step. It was his son who did. And that was telling us that things are not all right with the asked-for king. But the layout for the battleground is remarkable, similar also to the last time these 2 armies faced each other. 2 armies facing each other across a ravine. But there is something different this time. A single individual on the Philistine side that transforms this story. It's what makes this story so memorable. Goliath. Verse 4, there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath. The word champion means a man who is between. This man's name only appears twice in the whole narrative, but that's enough to make an impression on our memories. He's from one of the 5 Philistine cities that we heard about back in 1 Samuel chapter 5. Back then, the men of that city had been thrown into a panic when the Ark of the Covenant of God arrived, and they heard of what God's power could do, that God could fight without any need of those Hebrew slave people. But the fact that he is from Gath, reminds us that despite that previous defeat, the Philistines are still there, they've not been put away, and that they are still a threat to God's chosen people. Just have a look at this man. Look at how he's described. His height, 6 cubits and a span, about 9 feet 9 tall. That's almost 3 meters tall. But we hear about his height. We should also remember what God had said to Samuel in the previous chapter about choosing a king for God's people. Look back to 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7. And God said to Samuel, when you're choosing a king for God's people, do not look on his appearance or the height of his stature. But then how could you not look at the height of this man Goliath when he's so tall? And then look at his armour. Verse 5, he had a helmet of bronze on his head. He's armed with a coat of mail. The weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze, and he had a bronze armour on his legs. Now, one of the things that might be easy for us to miss is the vast quantity of metal that is being described here. It reminds us that the Philistines in this time, in their relationship with the Israelites, the Philistines held a monopoly on blacksmithing. This is not just a vast display of wealth rolling out it is rolling out the most advanced weaponry available in the age. It's as if one side turned up for a fight with cavalry on horseback, and the other side turns up with tanks. Usually, biblical narrative doesn't spend so much time on detail, but this time it seems to deserve it. One of the few things that we know about the Philistine battle dress of the time, that they usually wore feathers on their heads, but this man doesn't wear feathers. He has a bronze helmet. And with his coat of mail and his legs covered, the description is clearly of one who seems impregnable to any attack. And that's before we get to the offensive strength of this great enemy. I mean, just look at his weapons. Halfway through verse 6, a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spearhead weighed 600 shekels of iron, and his shield-bearer went before him. The thing described on his back here is probably actually a large curved sword rather than a javelin, and the head of the spear, however, weighs about 7 kilograms. Most of us have no idea what a weaver's beam is, but a weaver's beam would have had loops of cord on it, and it seems that Goliath's spear had some kind of a thong attached to it to give it an advantage of throwing power and accuracy. And we're also told in the second half of verse 7 that he has a shield that is so big that a servant has to go before him to carry it. It does make me pause and wonder, how does the narrator know all of this in such precise detail? Even at this point, the very fact that this is being recorded for us to read gives us a hint as to what's going to happen later in the narrative. At least someone survived to be able to describe what ends up happening. But it's not just what this man looks like that brings terror. His voice brings terror, ringing across the valley. As he shouts out the threat in verse 8, he stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle?" This fellow standing there is questioning the leadership. Previously, in the narratives of war, the person who gathered the Israelites for battle was the king or the great leader. Israel came out because they were called out. You see that in Samuel doing it in 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 5. But here, there's no indication that there is any Israelite initiative like there had been in chapters 13 and chapter 14. And if you glance back up to verse 2, you'll notice that Saul and the men of Israel were gathered. It's a passive expression. It is not that Saul gathered the people. No, their gathering's passive. It is a reaction to Philistine gathering, and they gathered together, and Saul's just one of the people. He's not providing any leadership here. Goliath shouts out, "Am I not a Philistine? And are you not the servants of Saul?" The way Goliath expresses this emphasizes his greatness compared to a people who should be and are slaves. That's his attitude toward the Israelites. And he comes up with a proposition. "Choose a man for yourselves," he says. "Let him come down to me." We are now familiar with this kind of language. Back in chapter 8, verse 18, Samuel reminded Israel that they did have, that they had chosen a king for themselves. You see the echo in what Goliath says? Choose a man for yourselves. That's just exactly what Israel has done. They asked for Saul to be a king for themselves. They found Saul to be so impressive because Saul was a head taller than everyone else, in chapter 10, verse 23. There's only one man in Israel. If the criteria for challenge is someone who is tall, it's the man they've already chosen for themselves. It's Saul, the one they asked for, the asked for king. But we don't hear any response from him. The proposal that is brought, we find in verse 9. "If he's able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your slaves. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you will be our slaves and serve us." Now we're going to find out that this was something of a lie. That wasn't how they were going to conduct the battle. But it is a proposition that would potentially spare a whole lot of bloodshed. Everyone in Israel army knows that there is someone among them who should answer this call. And if they don't know that, we know it. But Saul doesn't. No one does. And so Goliath shouts again in verse 10. The Philistine said, "I defy." Now that's a very strong word he uses there. It's a word that's full of contempt for the people that he's shouting at. "I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we might fight together." Friends, as we travel through the rest of the Bible, it becomes increasingly obvious that the real enemy of humanity, the real enemy of God's people, is actually not a giant standing between us and victory. Each one of us faces an enemy far greater than this giant Goliath. Each one of us faces the certain prospect of death. We face our sin, our rebellion against God that is constantly bringing us down. We face the evil one, the accuser, Satan, who accuses us and seeks to devour us. And it doesn't matter what the outlook on life that you have, whether you're an optimist or a pessimist, whether you're positive or negative about life, there's no point in happily ignoring the worst, and even pessimists have no idea how bad things really are for us. That's what we need to have in the back of our minds as we're reading this story. And as we look at that great enemy, death, we look back again at the response of Israel to the one who was threatening them with death. Verse 11, when Saul and all Israel heard the words of this Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. In the Israelite army, it doesn't seem there were very many optimists. No, things were far too real for that kind of nonsense. And this is a serious theological problem for Israel. Because back in 1 Samuel chapter 9 verse 16, God had promised to save his people from the hand of the Philistines. But here, their chosen king and all the people are terrified. That's not how it's supposed to be for the people of God. Remember, all the way back to the beginning of this story of 1 Samuel, back to the prayer that Hannah had prayed in chapter 2 verse 10. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Against them he will thunder in heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. The Lord's anointed should be great and victorious, with all the apparent strength to destroy an enemy, even one as great as Goliath, even this singular, terrifying Philistine. And of course, as we read on, we're going to find out that Hannah's prayer is wonderfully answered in a way that seems to be impossible. Impossible enough that the story still reaches into the present day 3,000 or so years later. And yet we manage to trivialize it, turning Goliath as a parallel to a bully in a playground or a boss who is unpleasant to us. Now we've started to think about the real threat that we face, the threat that Goliath actually represented to Israel. Goliath threatened death and destruction. For years, Christians have talked about the world, the flesh, and the devil. The great enemy, our Goliath, is not a man in full armour. It's not a bully in a playground. It's not an unpleasant boss. It's not a colleague who is very good at their job and has a go at us. It's not someone like that we can just overcome. No, the great enemy, our Goliath, is sin and death, and before them we are by ourselves utterly powerless. And even for us who are Christian people, for whom those threats of sin and death are over, there are still in our lives very frightening things, terrifying forces that are set against us. But in the New Testament, as we face those great threats, we have words like this from Romans chapter 8. What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own Son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? Who shall bring any charge against God's elect? It is God who justifies. Who is to condemn? Christ Jesus is the one who died, more than that, who was raised, who is at the right hand of God, who indeed is interceding for us. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation, or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or danger, or the sword? As it is written, for your sake we are being killed all day long. We are regarded as sheep to be slaughtered. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am sure that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Thank you for listening to the recording of the Dublin Bible Talks. You can join us in real time on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Dublin Time on Zoom, bit.ly/Dublin Bible Talks. That's bit.ly/Dublin Bible Talks.